The sun had just risen over the snow-covered peaks of the San Juan Mountains when Jason Walker, a 34-year-old structural engineer from Durango, Colorado, adjusted his backpack and made his way along the narrow trail winding through the wilderness above ice lakes. It was a crisp, clear morning. The air smelled of pine needles, cold rock, and a faint trace of snow still clinging to the shadows beneath the trees. Jason was hiking alone just like he always did. Ever since his divorce 2 years ago, he had withdrawn from people, from obligations, from everything that felt like noise. Out here in the mountains, he found something he couldn't find anywhere else. Peace. Raw, honest silence. He walked at a steady pace, breathing calmly, his boots crunching over the frozen path. The sun cast long rays between the trees, and somewhere below, the quiet trickle of a mountain stream could be heard. Everything was calm, almost too calm. And then, suddenly, he stopped. Mid-step, his body reacted before his mind could catch up. Something was wrong. A sound. One that didn't belong here. It wasn't a bird, or a deer, or a branch falling. It was a noise. Soft, agonized, like a whimper, barely carried through the forest, and then swallowed up again. Jason turned slowly, straining his ears. Maybe he'd imagined it. Maybe it was just the echo of his own footstep hitting a hollow rock. But then, again, clear this time, a drawn-out, muffled whine. So real, so close, it shot straight through his bones. He stepped back, then to the side, moving toward the sound. About 10 feet off the trail, the slope dropped steeply. Between mossy boulders and broken branches, he spotted a hole, almost completely hidden under a tangle of dry needles and deadwood. Jason crouched. Gently, he brushed the debris aside and leaned over the opening. It was deep, dark, dangerous. Maybe an old mining shaft, left behind from the days when silver was pulled from these mountains. Carved into the rock, narrow and unprotected. And from deep within, the sound came again. Clear now, a whimper, echoing from the shadows. A dog. Somewhere down there was a dog. Trapped. Jason inhaled sharply. His heart began to pound. He reached into his jacket pocket, no signal. No rope in his pack. No flashlight, just a small headlamp. And worst of all, no one else around. This time of year, hardly anyone hiked this high up. The snow was too close, the trails too risky. And yet, there was a dog. Trapped. Injured. Terrified. Jason stood, looked down again, and took a deep breath. One thought took shape in his mind, sharp and clear. If I walk away now, that dog will die. No doubt about it. He looked around. The wind picked up, tugging at his hood. The sun was higher now, but the air wasn't getting any warmer. He hadn't planned on saving a life today. He hadn't planned on descending into a place no sane person would ever willingly go. But sometimes plans change, because sometimes you hear something that you just can't ignore. And so, Jason began searching for a way down into the darkness, without knowing if he would ever come back the same. Jason stood at the edge of the shaft. The dark hole beneath him felt like the entrance to another world, cold, narrow, and unwelcoming. He could feel the adrenaline tightening in his chest as he stared into the depths. The sounds from above, the wind through the trees, the creaking of branches, vanished almost completely the moment he leaned over the edge. The howling was now steady, short, strained, then quiet again, almost like the animal down there was giving up. Jason knew that every minute counted. He checked his backpack, no rope, no climbing gear, just the headlamp, a bottle of water, a basic first aid kit, and a multi-tool. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. For a moment, he considered turning back to get help. But the thought passed as quickly as it came. Even if he managed to hike back to his car in under 3 hours, a big maybe, it would still take hours for rescue crews to arrive with the right equipment. And that dog didn't have hours. Jason started feeling along the rocky edge of the shaft, searching for a way down. Between ledges and twisted roots, there was just enough of a path to attempt a descent. Dangerous, but possible. He gripped the rocks with his hands, lowered himself carefully onto a narrow ledge, and searched with his feet for the next hold. The air changed immediately. It was damper, cooler, and filled with the earthy scent of old leaves and ancient stone. Down here in the shaft, it was nearly silent. The outside world had faded away. He switched on his headlamp. The beam was faint but enough to see. And then he saw him. Curled between two slabs of rock, lying on damp ground, was a little dog. Its fur was matted with dirt. Its sides rose and fell in shallow breaths. And the eyes, those eyes looked straight into his. Fear, pain, and hope. All at once. Jason froze. He spoke softly, no sudden movements, no panic, just quiet words. Hey there, buddy, you're okay? I'm here to help you, alright? I'm not gonna hurt you. The dog flinched slightly, then weakly raised its head. The right hind leg was twisted, probably broken. A bleeding gash ran along its side. Jason felt something twist inside him. This dog never had a chance of getting out on its own. He crouched slowly, reached into his backpack, and took out the emergency bandage. He had to move carefully. If the dog panicked, it could bite. Out of fear, out of pain, out of instinct. But the dog didn't move. He let him. He looked at him. He breathed slowly, as if he knew. This man was his last hope. Jason gently wrapped the wound, stroking the dog's neck with calm hands. He could feel him trembling, not just from the cold, but from exhaustion. And now came the hardest part, getting back up, with an injured dog in his arms. No help. Jason took a deep breath. He knew what he had to do, even if it would be the hardest climb of his life. Jason stood still for a moment, the injured dog curled up before him, and he could feel the weight of responsibility that had suddenly settled on his shoulders. The dog was weak but conscious, and somewhere in that gaze, constantly lifting to meet his, there was more than just fear. There was a quiet trust slowly forming. Jason continued to speak in a calm voice, like one speaks to a child who needs comfort. You've got to help me a little, okay? I'll get you out of here. But you've got to hang on, promise? Slowly, he took off his jacket and tied it with his backpack's belt to create some kind of makeshift stretcher. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing. With great care and soft words, he gently lifted the dog into it. The animal whimpered softly, but it let itself be carried. No panic, no struggling, as though it understood Jason's intentions. The climb back up was brutal. With every movement, Jason felt the strain in his shoulders. His arms began to burn almost immediately. The dog might have weighed only about 20 kilograms, not much for a healthy man, but in this cramped, uneven terrain, with no stable footing and constant balancing between rubble and rocks, every single kilo felt like a burden. He felt his way up, step by step. Every grip, every step had to be perfect. One mistake, and he could fall, or worse, lose the dog. The wind had picked up by now, and what had been a clear morning had turned into a cloudy afternoon. The shadows grew longer, and the cold began to bite into his fingers. Jason was sweating, despite the cold. His forehead was damp, his breathing quick and heavy. After nearly 20 minutes, which felt like hours, he reached the top edge. With his last ounce of strength, he pulled himself up, and then the dog. He sank to his knees for a moment, catching his breath, and placed his hand on the animal, who lay quietly beside him, looking up with tired, big eyes. You're a real fighter, you know that, he murmured, and a smile briefly crossed his face. Jason knew they weren't safe yet. The path back to his car would take another 2 hours, and the dog could hardly walk. But they had made it out of the shaft, and that meant everything. He carried the dog the rest of the way, now cradling him in his arms, switching sides regularly, taking breaks, speaking softly to him as if they were old friends. And with each step, Jason felt something he hadn't in a long time, a kind of warmth, not physical but deeper. He had saved someone, and it felt like, in that moment, he had also saved a part of himself. By the time he reached his car, it was late afternoon. The dog was calm, almost asleep. Jason carefully opened the trunk, laid him on a blanket, and sat down behind the wheel. He was exhausted. His muscles trembled. His hands were dirty and scraped, but he felt alive. And he knew the story wasn't over yet. The drive back to Durango was silent. Jason drove slowly, focused, glancing repeatedly in the rearview mirror where the dog lay curled up on the blanket. He barely moved, but his breathing was steady. That was a good sign. When Jason stopped in front of the animal clinic on Main Avenue, it was almost dark. The emergency room was still open, and the staff immediately responded when he walked through the door, the injured animal in his arms. I found him in an old shaft up by the Ice Lakes Trail. He's injured, but conscious. Please help him, Jason said, his voice urgent. The veterinarian, an older woman with a gentle voice named Dr. Keller, nodded and took the dog from him. Jason stayed behind, alone in the waiting room, his hands covered in dirt, his knees scraped, but strangely calm on the inside. It took over an hour before she came back to him. He's very lucky, she said. His paw is broken, but we can fix that. And the wound on his flank is deep, but not life-threatening. He's a fighter, no doubt. Do you know if he belongs to someone? Jason shook his head. I didn't find a collar. He was all alone down there. Dr. Keller nodded. Then he'll stay here for now. But if you don't want to keep him, we'll contact a rescue in a few days. Jason remained silent. Keep him? The idea surprised him, but it felt right. He drove home, took a shower, and sat on his couch, staring blankly into space. The dog's gaze kept replaying in his mind, those first moments when they had looked at each other in the darkness below. 2 days later, the call came from the clinic. The dog was stable, calm, a little weak, but on the mend. Jason didn't stand in front of the kennel for long. He didn't say much. The dog, now clean and well cared for, looked at him, wagging his tail lightly, despite the bandage, despite the pain, despite everything he'd been through. And in that moment, it was all clear. His name is Cooper, Jason said softly to the assistant standing beside him. I'm taking him home. Weeks passed. Cooper had to rest a lot, was gently cared for, given medication and food, and eventually had his own cushion by the window. And during all that time, something grew between the two of them, something that couldn't be put into words. Trust, gratitude, and something that felt suspiciously like love. Jason started going out more. Not alone, but with Cooper by his side. And every time they walked through the woods together, the dog would sometimes turn around as if to say, I haven't forgotten you. And Jason would just nod and smile, because he hadn't forgotten either. Two souls who hadn't been searching for each other, but found each other where no one else looked. What would you have done in Jason's shoes? Would you have had the courage to rescue a dog from a dangerous situation, even when the odds were stacked against you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe to my channel, and I see you in the next video.